Welcome to Project Insight's Professional Development Series. Today's session, Time Management for a 24/7 World, takes on one of the biggest challenges facing project managers today: how to effectively manage work across time zones, virtual teams, and nonstop demands. With globalization, outsourcing, and around-the-clock collaboration, project leaders need new strategies to balance productivity, innovation, and work-life harmony. In today's session, we'll look at the pressure of 24/7 work, including the speed of technology changes, challenges of team collaboration, and impacts on work-life balance. A few housekeeping notes. Everybody will be on mute. You are encouraged to use the chat as we go. It looks like a few members are saying hi already, so nice to have you with us. Please feel free to do that throughout today's session. This is good for one PDU certificate. You will get a QR code to scan toward the end of the session, and you'll get mailed that certificate by the end of the week. This recording will be accessible via the same link you joined from. Today, we are joined by Steve West, co-founder and CEO of Project Insight, and Diane Buckley-Altwies, CEO of Core Performance Concepts. Diane is a partner of ours at Project Insight. Together, they're going to share insights and practical tools to help you manage projects in a world that never sleeps. Are you guys ready to get started?
Absolutely. And, none of us ever sleep. I heard that Steve was up, and both of you were up early this morning. So
yes,
we are all living. We are all living this 24/7 topic today.
Yeah, we had a 3 a.m. server talking to us and then a 5 a.m. call.
Nice. Always
That's
fun.
Right.
Always fun. Well, welcome everybody. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you all. What I want to start out with is just like where we've come. I mean, if you think about it, this kind of technology in the workplace has really only been around 75 years. And whether I want to believe it or not, I've been around most of that 75 years. So, the first little section of the 50s and 60s is when my father was in it. But I've been around for most of the others and I've seen the changes and how it really does impact, how we work today. If we want to kind of look back in the past, back in the 50s and 60s, technology was just starting out. I mean, this is COBOL, Fortran, big computers, big rooms, to have all that processing power that was actually less than what's in your phone today. But there really was very few outsourcing kind of capabilities out there, unless they were like big, maybe consulting firms, big offices that, had a computing room, so that was kind of the 50s and 60s. And then
like IBM,
Yeah. My father worked on a computer with vacuum tubes and stuff, and was one of the first ones to do barcodes back then. So, it's technology has come a long way. And then in the 70s and 80s, which is where I kind of started getting my feet wet, you did see more of those big consulting firms that were providing data processing for large firms. A lot of it was more about, jobs that ran late at night. Banks, I actually worked in a bank back in the early 80s, and worked in the computer room, and we had to process all the transactions, but you only process those transactions at night. Nobody's bank account got updated real time back then. Call centers started coming into play. But if you think about that, the organization was set up to where it was a separate, unit, a separate entity. It wasn't kind of a real-time interaction with people with, from different areas of the world. So that was kind of the 70s and 80s. Then comes the 90s. And this is where I think Steve and Matt, you guys start showing up here. Get the internet.
Probably not Matt, but me.
The late 90s. I joined the workforce young, so
at the end. He's at the end of that 90s.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is where, we start getting this thing called the internet. And right around that late 80s, early 90s, you start seeing the onset of personal computers on your desk, and onset of Excel. I remember Excel back in the late 80s as well. It was actually pretty powerful back then too. But we didn't have the internet. You had the computer, but you didn't have the internet. So now in the 90s, we're starting to see the internet and the telecom, where now we can call people in different areas. You can make phone call to, Europe and Asia and things like that. It was very expensive, but you could.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when you start seeing, okay, well, there's cheaper labor that were pretty technically savvy in other parts of the world. Why not take advantage of that labor force and, grow these offshore development centers? My big experience though back then was we had to basically define our requirements, and then we might have emailed it. We probably did email it, the requirements out to them, and then they would develop, and then they would send back in a way. And, the eye-opening thing to me back then was whatever you wrote down is what you got. So if you weren't a very good communicator in writing, you didn't get a very good product coming back. Right. So there was not an interactive, approach. How about you guys? How about in the 90s? What did you see?
Well, I mean, obviously going to college and using computers in the college and email and internet was basically getting started in the beginning there. And my first job was with a software company, and then of course moving on and doing software development for .com startup companies and all that. We were pretty much online right away because that's what I did for a living. But
were you
I
online
do think
with other countries at that point in time, Steve?
our team was here in California in Irvine, our development team. And so mostly my customers were in Southern California at the time because, we're talking 1997, 98, 99. Although when I was working for the software company, we did have customers worldwide, but that particular company, and they were doing faxing stuff. But we did, most of those customers, there was off the shelf. We shipped on a DVD to them, the product shipped on DVD. But after moving into doing web development for .com startups, then most of our work was online, but the actual collaboration was a lot of times in person.
Yeah.
With the customers.
Yeah,
because they were explaining to you the infrastructure that we have today wasn't there. We were building that kind of infrastructure, building like an extranet. But we did do some jobs over the phone, where you would talk to them over the phone. And but I don't recall GoToMeeting really wasn't, or Citrix I guess was the first, and then GoToMeeting. And we used all that stuff as soon as it was available and worked halfway decent. So
right. And it's one, but you made a really good point, is most of the conversations were either phone or in person.
Yeah.
Right. Or like in my case where we were emailing, out to these offshore groups, what those requirements are, but there wasn't, a real time interaction like with Skype or, chats or Microsoft Teams or even StreamYard. So, and even if you did, the delays were a lot more, right? It
was cumbersome. Even now, if you can meet in person, that's still the gold standard, I think, for collaboration. But what's it worth to you, right? If your resources are all over the world and the talent is all over the world, then, maybe it's not worth it to try to get everybody together for every little thing, right? It doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. Right. And maybe go ahead, Smart.
I was just going to say, how much more collaboration can you do through this setting, right? Versus having to go be at every location. Like the amount of times that you can interact are so much greater because of that technological advancement. Even if I agree with Steve that the gold standard is we're in a room and we can kind of hash it out right then and there. So,
and we did I remember doing some really big projects for big companies, and you would just have a week, we'd meet for the 3 or 4 days to do the project planning for what was going to happen. And that still has a lot of value if it's big enough to do something like that. And then you break off and do your part, but then at least you got your WBS, you get everybody involved.
Right? Yeah, and
we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's always about getting used to the technology too. So there's always that time to, transition, to, get used to the change. The technology does catch up because there was a lot of times, even with, the video calling and stuff like that, or just the conference calling, that was first, and then we finally get the video calling, and there's all kinds of hurdles with that where things would freeze and you drop and you didn't have the right, but now the technology is to where, and again, COVID probably accelerated a lot of that, where you can get to know each other more, maybe it's still not the gold standard, but it's not unattainable with kind of web conferencing like we're doing today. I mean, when was the last time I saw you live, Steve? Never met
yesterday. Matt. Live. Yeah.
Live.
I thought you meant on the phone.
Yeah.
See, like virtual is live now.
That's true.
Right.
It's been a while because you would move to Florida, and I don't go to Florida that much.
This is true. Yeah. So, and again, now in the, late 90s, 2000s, you started seeing a lot more people that are working as contractors, as freelance people too, all over the world. So, the technology has allowed for a 24/7 workforce, and it's not easy to be truly effective with it. There's always the chance to, waste time, etc. I mean, I know I'm on teams that have people from India to Eastern Europe to East Coast to West Coast, and trying to figure out how to bond as a team is very difficult, so even though we know 24/7 cycles, 24/7 workforce is available, we still have to learn how to best utilize it and be effective with it. So let's talk about some of the key challenges that we have out there. It is 24/7. I don't know about you guys, but do you want to work truly 24/7? Are you connected 24/7?
Just about.
Yeah, I was thinking connected. Yes.
I know. It's like I was having a conversation with a project manager a couple of weeks ago, and it's one of those things where the workforce that she's working with is pretty much the entire world, and she's trying to figure out how to be able to have time with her family, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the job is demanding enough to where you kind of have to be available, but that doesn't mean you have to be available all day long. It kind of means that you have to figure out what's the best mix, and companies haven't yet. There's all kinds of hybrids out there, but I think what companies need to start thinking about is the role and whether or not the role requires more access offline or at different hours. For example, you might have a team of developers that are in Poland, right? And this company may require that group works a certain time frame. Maybe it's East Coast time, or maybe it's Poland time, and that's just when they're working. And then you might have a team of people that are in the U.S. And are you going to have them work East Coast time, West Coast time, Central time, or all of it? And having that discussion about what are the requirements? Then you got to think about the client. Like, where's your clients that you're talking to? So it's not just the internal team. So I think there's going to be an evolution of selecting the appropriate time for that particular project, because I don't think there's a one size fits all. Right now it's kind of like in Steve and your case, Matt, it's like, oh, every once in a while I got to get up at 3 a.m. or got to work till 2 a.m. to make sure that things get implemented correctly. But that doesn't mean I'm up at 2 a.m. and down and leaving at 2 a.m. I'm not up 24/7. So
right.
It's a huge challenge, and how companies support the workforce without burning them out is going to be something to see.
I think you're right. Aligning all of those stakeholders together, right? The resource or the employee themselves and the organization, and then of course your client or customer's needs where those deliverables are being met is so important. I think I read an article last week in the Wall Street Journal that was talking about, people are still starting in the office at the same time that they always had, but they're leaving early. And I think that some of that has to do with that exact scenario where I might be taking calls or doing emails or working into the evening time, right? Where I'm still trying to, have some sort of semblance of work-life balance there. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like I said, I don't think there is, with the way technology is today, I think the days of a pure 8 to 5 are gone, but hopefully we can still keep it a 40-hour work week, right?
Yeah, that's tough.
It is tough. Another challenge that I see out there is just, what the speed of technology. I see, if a company's not moving fast enough with technology change, we could be losing opportunities. If a company, if technology's changing so much that you don't have the right resources to implement that particular technology, you may not be able to deliver well enough, and you're going to lose revenues. You also, if you don't respond with updated technology, you might lose market share. And then, there's always that shiny object. Sometimes I see companies go after the next shiny object and they leave their clients behind. They want to, they put all their resources towards that next shiny object. And there's always going to be that transitional period from somebody moving from the fax system, Steve, to something more modern. And how do you keep those clients engaged and aligned with you and your company as you move things forward? So we really have to think about what we are delivering and the speed of change with technology. I mean, we've talked about AI on these webinars before, and I do see a little bit of analysis paralysis going on and a little bit of freezing as to, well, I don't know if I want to commit to this technology because AI is going to change things. And, I think there's a level of, we have to, your technology partners, you have to be aligned with your technology partners and understand and trust where they're going. That's kind of a key thing here. So, how fast do you need your technology partners to move with technology changes, and how do you need, as a client, how do you need those technology changes, and how fast do you need it? So the speed is going to be another whole discussion with how to evolve as an organization.
I really like the point that you brought up of making sure you're not just pursuing that new shiny object, that you're keeping the alignment with what customer needs are or the market needs as far as that's concerned. Right? That for some reason made me think of the transition from VHS to DVD, or maybe you went Laserdisc and you went the wrong way, right? You invested in that wrong technology platform, and you weren't aligned with what the market did, and now you're maybe out of business at this point. So
yeah, and we're actually going to, a little preview to next month is we're going to talk about that from a portfolio standpoint in our next webinar. So everybody come back and we can talk more about how to layer those opportunities over in a portfolio that ensures your company's success. So this is another one, and are we taking that into consideration moving forward? And then the last challenge that I wanted to discuss here is just finding time. You got people on the West Coast, you got people in the East Coast, you got people in Poland, you got people in India. There's probably a 1 hour window that your time overlaps in a normal business setting. And how do you use that time effectively? How do you continue to innovate with each other? And how do you get to build those relationships with each other? So, like I said earlier, it is possible to build relationships over the internet. We've, hopefully, Matt, you would agree with that. We've built a relationship, and all we've ever done is talk talk online.
Right.
And, it is possible. Does it take longer? Probably. Is it as effective as face-to-face? Probably not. And how are we going to do that? And how are we going to consider that as we move forward? So go ahead.
I was just going to say we did a really we had one of our podcast episodes with Blizzard Activision Blizzard, and they were talking about that specifically, right? As we're merging in new companies, how do we find time to still have that bonding happen within our the members of our team? And I really liked the concept that they met at different times and they did things that were online that weren't just kind of those Zoom happy hour kind of things where they were meeting and playing games and doing all these different pieces. So I think that the technology there's a lot of options that you can do to continue to keep that strong bond between teams.
Yeah, and keep that thought, because as we go through, because now we're going to jump over into the different strategies for helping you. So that like I said, the challenges here is, how are we going to collaborate together? How are we going to make sure that we're moving the company forward with the appropriate speed of, technology change, and how are we balancing our team members, lives for the better of the company without impacting the employees per se. So let's talk about some different solutions here. So the first one, it comes down to tools. And, this is Project Insight, right? And Project Insight is an amazing tool that does help, keep that communication open between all the different time zones. And, there's a couple components of it. First, there's a scheduling component, making sure that the schedule that's out there, people can see it, they can touch it, they can see the status. Matt, I think you're going to show us some things on Project Insight. So I'm going to let you do that on how scheduling helps us stay connected.
Yeah, what's really nice about Project Insight is that we have the ability to combine really all of those pieces across the board that you were just showing there, Diane, but specifically around scheduling. This is a project plan. This is my task list, or WBS, depending on what sort of vernacular you want to use. This is ultimately the assignments that we're going to do to get our work complete, right? So I'm going to have handoffs. I'm going to have tasks that need to be done. Some might happen at the same time. Some may happen in different kind of segments. But the idea here is I can have what that task is, put in my duration, put in the amount of time it's going to take to actually complete that, right? Wherein I'm not going to give Steve 40 hours in 1 week to do an item because he probably has other work that he's doing, right, to get that done. So I can then associate that with my start and my end date and tie those together with other activities or join them out, and then assign individual resources to those tasks to have completed.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I was
Diane.
going to add to that. And if something changes, let's say, Matt, you're working with a team in India, right? Yeah. And they're asleep right now, right?
Right.
So if something as the project manager, you see something changing, you can make those adjustments here. You can highlight those adjustments. You can communicate those adjustments. And when they get in, it's front of mind. It's right there for them to respond to, right away. So it's, critical to have a tool that's real time like this.
Well, and then everybody knows where to go to get the right information.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. And with all the automatic notifications, maybe that change isn't relevant right now. Maybe I'm grabbing a task, on the Gantt and I'm moving it from December to February. So, it's not really going to impact anybody's day today, but it will impact the rest of the project plan. We can then automatically notify the team members when that change is relevant to them. Also capturing baselines all along the way, right? We have where we started. This is what we planned. Here's our deviation, or here's our baseline anywhere throughout.
Yeah.
The added benefit to having a tool like ours is I can have what we call work schedules tied to these, wherein Steve and I work on the same times and we have the same holidays, right? So in that way, we know the times that we are going to be on and that we're not, we can also allow for multiple work schedules. So that way, my team that is in Europe may celebrate, Orthodox dates that we don't celebrate in the States, and they have different holidays, so we can program those all accordingly. This ties into also the idea of what work hours I work, right? So I'm 8 to noon, I take an hour lunch break, and then I come back till 5. And this is geo-specific. So Diane, if you're looking at this on the East Coast and it's afternoon for you, it's going to say, hey, good afternoon, Diane. And Steve and I are on the West, and it's going to say good morning for us still. So there's quite a bit of flexibility with that and how you can schedule it. And then the other piece that you can tie into these work schedules, which then again fall back into my planning efforts, is the idea of PTO, right? That work-life balance where, I am going to take time off. I am going to have different things that come up. I can block those times out as an individual. So I'm looking at my time away or holiday calendar here where I can say I'm going to be gone on the 9th and the 10th, although that's not accurate. I'm working right now, right? But I can have that in there, and then that rolls into the project plan and into the other allocation pieces that we'll show as we go through. So,
Well, and then you can see other people on your team, what their schedule looks like.
Right. And even like sometimes, and if I'm running a project, that's across the country, across the world, I might work from 6 a.m. to noon, take a couple hours in the afternoon, and come back at 5 to make sure that I'm communicating with getting all prepped for the next day, for people. And I can put that in there. I can identify that.
Right. You can have your own individual work schedule on that specifically. So as we assign those tasks to you, Diane, that's what it's going to plan out my projects accordingly, right? Your 5 days might be different because you work Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays compared to Steve's who works Tuesday through Friday, right? So
Right. It's awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So scheduling, having a tool that crosses time zones, that's real time from a scheduling standpoint, is amazing. Second part is managing the work. And I know, especially from a development standpoint, there's other tools that developers prefer, like, DevOps or Jira. Having something that integrates with those other kinds of tools where we as the project manager or the project team isn't having to duplicate, data entry and things like that, because part of the whole work-life balance is feeling like you're just doing a lot of busy work for no reason, right? So there's capabilities that you can integrate some of the key tools to minimize the data entry duplication and maximize your time, so that you're not having to manage those what I would call points of failure, right?
100%. Yeah, no, I think, that's really why we have built out integrations with tools like Jira or DevOps or ServiceNow or Freshservice, because there are teams, and especially as we look at the global landscape, that are performing in different platforms that us as the project management office or the operations teams or whoever is in here, maybe Bill and Dylan and Patrick aren't going to be in Project Insight marking tasks as complete. In this particular instance, maybe I'm going to make the assignments and build the project plans in our tool, and then I'm going to send it into Jira as an example, and let these team members come in here and log time, put comments, documentation, mark the work as being complete, and then as real time is in tech today, which is pretty dang fast, right? We're talking kind of milliseconds, but that data then comes back and updates my project plan. So
certainly
everybody,
faster than I can type it in.
Oh my gosh, certainly faster than, Steve updating an Excel sheet and then me looking at this sheet to then reference them and bring them together, right? It all happens there. The added benefit about these types of integrations is we allow for lots of different ways to sync the platforms together, right? So it's not just this kind of, I do it this way and that's the only way that it works, because organizations, right, Steve, are very different in how they operate.
Well, definitely. I mean, we found that even in a single organization, you have teams that are using all kinds of different tools, like spreadsheets in one tool. Another team might be using a tool like Project Insight or one of the other ones out there. And the dev team's using DevOps or Jira. And they have really valid and good reasons to use those tools. So our goal when we made these integrations was to help the project manager actually not have to double enter data. So
and actually, to that point, Steve, that's even why these platforms we allow for multi-connect, right? I may have
more
team
than one
A.
Jira.
Yeah, I may have team A on one instance of Jira and team B on another, and I can still bring all of that data into Project Insight to get that a level of, no duplicate effort and reporting that we'll show in a little bit.
Yep, that's amazing. And then you just kicked us off on the next one, Matt, was reporting. And again, in the theme of working in a 24/7 world, having a tool that helps us with our reporting, again, not having to duplicate data entry, rekey things into an email, into a PowerPoint, whatever, having the ability to customize the presentation to the stakeholder, whether it's an internal stakeholder or an external stakeholder, having that kind of capability also helps with our work-life balance. It's like knowing that the data is all coming together, and I'm going to have as accurate as my team has entered it, the output's going to be that accurate.
Reporting is critical, and you can spend a lot of time on that. So if you can automate as much as possible.
Yeah, we've had customers that spend hours at somebody's job just to build all the reports from looping things together. So when you have the ability to combine multiple tools or all of the efforts of everybody in one application, it makes it really easy. Within Project Insight, we allow for lots of different types of reports. One of the ones that I think is really handy is the idea of having, a cross-project Gantt chart just to get that quick update of where are we, right? So here are my projects. Here's the type of work we're doing. Our progress line is being made across the middle. Here's where we should be, right? And then I can understand my milestones are diamonds, and they're closed, meaning they're complete, or they're open, meaning they need to be done. Because this isn't a sheet that poor Susan had to make over the last 3 weeks' time, I can click in here and comment and collaborate and say, hey, Megan, you're delayed. When do you expect this to be done so that we can get an update? I can see dependencies between different projects. All of our reporting options, and this is a project report of all active pieces, are drag and drop systems. So I can move these columns around to be the way that I want them to look. I can right click and insert or remove the fields that are relevant to the type of work that we're doing. And then I have the ability to group these together by really any of the columns, in addition to kind of, show and hiding based on what's applicable to me or my team as well via filters. But in this way, I can say, hey, these are my 10 critical projects. I want to monitor these a little bit more closely than maybe these lower ones, but I still have visibility into all of these in one shot. These reports can be saved. They can be included in your menu when you log right in. I can share them so Steve has access when he logs in and doesn't need to do anything other than go right to a report or a dashboard. And then, I can take that even a step further and send that out in automatic cadence if that's what I wish to do, which is great because, I can have these reports shared with internal and external members. So in that way, we're working a partnership, deal with Diane where we're doing an onboarding process that we're joint on. I can share information to her on the project that's applicable to her without worrying about contaminating all of our portfolio information. So,
yeah, no, I mean, tools are critical in helping us manage our day. And then the last component of tools, which still needs across all industries, still needs work, is with all this savings of not having to duplicate things, et cetera, and using the right tools, I would love to see us as an industry get to the point where we're measuring the success of the projects on a more regular basis, on whether or not, every project in your charter where you identify, is this project there to improve efficiencies? Is it a new product? Is it something to, help us, implement clients faster? Is it getting us more market share? Having a way to be able to get to that kind of data as the output of our projects would be ideal. But at least freeing up time for all this duplicate data entry will allow us to focus on what really is important. It's not just delivering the project on time, on budget, on within the right scope. It's, did it provide the results? So that's kind of the next horizon there, is to really figure out how do we get the time to ensure that we're doing that more frequently and more deliberately as project managers.
Yeah, and I think, again, that's where, having an application like Project Insight, in your back pocket really helps, because you can in real time have that idea of, what we've planned and then what we've delivered, right? So this is kind of an allocation report where I can look forward out to see what we're planning on doing. Any of these reports, I can look forward or backward in time. So I have the ability to look retroactively at how did we perform, right? So based on the programs and then based on the projects within, we stated we were going to work 19 hours and we did 4. And what's my variant, right? And I can show this.
And did I get the results that I wanted, right? So
exactly.
That's where I think the real value of the project manager is, as we get more and more mature, right? As an industry, is being really efficient at doing our projects, at managing that data, of making sure we're tracking to the expectation, but then getting more into proving that the project's delivering on what it was expected to deliver. That would be nirvana, right?
Right.
Yeah.
This is what we set out to do. Did all of those efforts equate to approval? And yes, we did, or no, we did not, right? And again, that's where I think having it all in one application makes it a lot easier to manage for the project manager. Nothing's a silver bullet, right? There's still management that happens. There's still collaboration. It's just that a lot of that effort, that it takes exactly is there.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, having the tool will free you up to be able to do the measuring.
Yep.
Right.
That's really the key.
Absolutely. All right. Well, awesome overview of the capabilities with Project Insight that can help us in managing our day in a 24/7 world. There's a couple other strategies that we want to talk about before we close for the day. The other one is just personal time management and managing your team. So some of the things that you brought up earlier, Matt, about, you've got a team around the world. How do I spend time with them? How do I get to know them? There's lots of different strategies out there. Like I said, there's probably an hour or 2 each day that everybody's available, and you need to use that smartly. One of the things I like to do, and it's not like every day, because I think it's important for the team, the entire team, to get together so they know who's on the team, what they're doing, etc. So once a week, once every other week, have something that brings the entire team together, that allows you to collaborate, share, innovate. You can have different topics. You can have different topics and agendas, just to kind of keep the team engaged and in getting to know each other. I'm a big fan of, in general, I'm a big fan of smaller meetings, but when you're working in a world, in a 24/7 world, not connecting on a regular basis with the entire team will impact your performance in a couple different ways. It basically, they don't understand what the project's about. They're doing their own thing. You're not really monitoring their output per se. Of course you have the tools, but it's more than just like, did somebody check the box? Are things working? Are we getting the results we want? So there's a lot of components to that. So I highly recommend that find the appropriate amount of time to get the whole team involved on a call to talk through various things. Don't make it the same thing all the time. That's another part of it. It's like, you want people to walk in there knowing there's going to be something new to discuss and not something old, right? It's not a stand up. It's not, and it could just be about some fun thing. Like you said, Matt, it could just be, let's do a little team building event this particular week. But you don't want to do that every single week because there's some people that don't like to do that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you gotta get creative.
And if you can mix that in versus you don't want to spend a whole hour on the team building, if you can just do a little bit as you go.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that getting the right cadence, when should the meeting be, how often are we going to meet? That's important, and I don't think there's a silver bullet answer for that. It depends on your project and your people.
Exactly. And then the other one that I see people do, like they as a project manager, they start their project and they start doing these one-on-ones with their team members. I think that's great. But what I end up seeing a lot of times is they become stale as well. And then we start canceling them. One person or the other's canceling them. That's a sign, right? If you want to get the most out of your team, if you really, take the time with that person, delve into maybe a piece of work that they did, have them talk about what they did, what they like, what they did. Again, give them that one-on-one time, get to know them. Because if you're starting to understand how they tick, then you can also, we've had these conversations about, conflict resolution. There will be conflict. But I see sometimes that people get kind of a little lazy on one-on-ones and they start seeing them canceled often. And that's not necessarily something you want to do.
I think it also shows a lack of priority, right? On both of those instances, if you're not prioritizing that team bonding or you're pushing those off because we've got deliverables to do, right? Which, of course, if you got deliverables, we all know you need to get those done. But keeping the priority of those keeps that morale up and can really help strengthen those relationships, I think.
Yeah, and as an example, even if there might be something let's just say I have a regular meeting with somebody and something's popped up that's taking me away. Mm-hmm. I don't normally just cancel the call. I will reschedule it. And I'd like to give people as much notice as possible because it's also not fun to, especially if they got up at 6 a.m. to have your call with you and then you cancel it at 5:45. There's things that disincent your team,
Definitely.
So please make sure that we're when we commit to meeting with people, we spend the time we meet. Doesn't always have to be about work specific things. It could be a little bit fun. It could be a little bit social. But those are things that are important that make people feel connected. And again, we want that work-life balance. And I want to feel like my company appreciates me, right? And I want my team to feel like I appreciate them. So those kinds of things are important. And then, like I said earlier, I'm a huge proponent of smaller meetings, very targeted meetings. Keep them as short as you can to let people get work done. I do see, I've had experience where the clients would overcommit meetings and constantly change them. Constantly. How do you plan your day when people are constantly changing meetings on you, right?
It's
how
tough.
do you get your work done? Right.
Yeah. That's part of the challenge of all of this is that you're balancing, Zoom calls. And I do think Zoom calls take longer than in person to get things across.
Yes, they do.
But, if you're able to meet remote, then you don't have to commute. Right. So there's just a lot of give and take.
Right. And just be conscious about, how often you change meetings, cancel meetings, move me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because you want people to get their work done and people want to get their work done. But if they're, constantly their days constantly changing, you're going to have inefficient people. So again, it goes to being effective. It's be deliberate about your meetings, make sure, take the time to get to know people, spend the time with them and be conscious of their time and what you're doing whenever you're having to change something. Because there will be times you have to change it, but but try not to do it on a frequent basis.
A lot of that just is making me flash back to our other PDU sessions of kind of our project management 101s, right? You're a good communicator. You're taking into consideration what your stakeholders need. If your dev members prefer to get that done in the morning, let them do that. Have your meetings in the afternoon, but don't give them that shifting sand where their meeting, the meeting time might drop out and change on them. Be mindful of all of that.
Yeah, I have to be mindful. And the other thing too is with the onset of AI, and one of the places that AI we're seeing a lot in now is in meetings. Remember, don't take it for granted that people have read the notes. Like don't assume, right? So it actually, I'd love to see where AI ends up going. Where how can it tell me like the things that I need to look at, right? Because you're going to start getting a whole lot of emails with the notes from the meetings, but not all those notes are going to be important. And if you were there, does it know you were there? They should, or not know you were there. So I think there's some interesting things AI could do in helping us make sure we keep the communication flowing. But we'll see where that goes. And then the last strategy is about ensuring that your team can articulate the importance without you. So all of the stuff we talk about with tools and with communicating with your team is very important with, in moving things forward and seeing good results. The ideal thing, in my opinion, is can the team run without you, right? So if you've got the tools and if you've got the connections that people are meeting in the appropriate cadence and things like that, and they're kind of running on their own. The next part is do they understand how fast the project needs to go or not? Do they understand the level of quality that needs to be delivered? And do they understand, what happens if they end up taking 5 extra hours on a task and what that does to the budget? So this is kind of more of a maturity piece, and another reason to have these ongoing meetings with the entire team, you can reinforce the priorities of speed, of quality, of budget, constantly, providing them input as to how we're doing against it. And, sometimes priorities do shift. And so making sure we're communicating that and they're understanding that today, the most important thing are these 3 items. And the 4 that you were working on last week are a little bit lower priority at this point. So constantly have that communication. The ideal situation is where everything can run without you there. This is how you, as the project manager, get some work-life balance too, right? If you're constantly worried about making sure you are like directing traffic for every resource on your project, you're not doing yourself a favor, right?
That's funny, Diane. That made me think of like herding cats. If that's what you feel like you're doing, you need to get the cats a little book and a little resources so they know where they should be going and move them, let them do it themselves.
Well, the tools help, right? Right. And so if I'm the project manager, like especially if I'm dealing with an offshore, in Eastern Europe or Asia or something like that, I'm usually spending my afternoon making sure that the team offshore knows what they're working on as a priority the next day. Right. Mm-hmm. And then, so that I can feel confident that they're going to be working on the right priorities tomorrow. If I delay that and say, oh, I'm tired, I really don't want to, I'm shutting off today, what's going to happen? They're going to be working on probably the wrong things.
Yeah.
Because you haven't updated their priority list. And now I'm delaying 24 hours because now tomorrow I have to make sure I do that. And I already missed the opportunity for them to take that work in the morning. So as a project manager, I'm always kind of paying attention to those dependencies on that schedule, like who's taking the ball tomorrow and making sure that person knows. Now, in a perfect world, I don't have to do that in the afternoon and everything's all well organized and well articulated and the team knows where they go. what they have to do. But I feel more comfortable with just at least like, hey, first thing in the morning, guys, I need you to make sure we are focusing on this and getting these things done to keep us on track. And that helps me and allows me to have my evening and my glass of wine and relax. And that applies to the quality of the project too. Are they spending too much time on something, or actually, one other thought on quality. Many of you have QA teams, and a lot of times I see where companies think of their QA team as just workers. They're just doing tests. That QA team can be a big advocate for you, especially if they understand the quality that needs to be delivered to the customer. To going back to those measurements, if you give them the authority to question and to delve into something, you'd be surprised what a great resource that is. And then you don't have to do it. So this goes to that measurement stuff that we were talking about earlier. So, if your QA team understands the level of quality that's needed, let them go for it. I'd much rather see them poke holes in our deliverables before the clients do.
I know, right? That's way better if you can solve that on your own internally.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of companies that just consider their QA team as just tactical processors, which they're very strategic if you use them right.
Yeah, definitely.
So hopefully, we've got several ideas to help streamline your day, to help streamline your organization's day, so that you can work in a 24/7 world without, with some work-life balance.
Thank you so much, Diane.
Yeah, that was a great discussion. It's very difficult and challenging these days. I think we need to move on.
Yes, sir.
The final.
Yep. So grab out your phones, hit that QR code. Speaking of, coming full circle, Diane was talking about barcodes at the, kind of when her dad was in the career, and that was kind of the cutting edge technology. And now we can spin up the equivalent at any point and scan it and do what we need to. In this instance, it'll be a form that you can fill out, put in your contact info. You will receive your PDU before the end of the week. Thank you all so much for joining. This session will be accessible on this recording as well for the future. In addition to that, we have some upcoming, additional pieces as we do. We have a power tutorial specifically on Project Insight next week around streamlining your cash to payment process. So the idea that I sell work, I execute work, and I then get the money on that, right? So that's then. As Diane mentioned earlier, we are doing our next PDU around that portfolio, right? So shaping your future with your company's portfolio. That'll be in October, and we'll go from there. Thank you all so much for joining. And we did touch and leave a couple notes in for the Wear Your Cape to Work podcast as well. You can, again, hit that QR code and find your favorite place to stream. But we have had lots of wonderful conversations with the real superheroes, in our opinion, of the world, which is the project managers who get the world that we all love and live in. So thank you all so much for attending.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.